Hey, Ryan Falkenrath here, Set to PACE Triathlon, answering your questions here. We got one on Ironman training chat from Nate. Been training for his first half Ironman in the past 9 months. He's looking at Dubai. I understand the date's kind of in flux right now. Wondering what tips he had to keep the heart rate down while running. So most weeks he starts at 150 beats a minute and then gets up to 180. He's in all of those and keep 130. And his bike, he's 148 to 154. So first of all, don't get confused that all athletes or experienced or any athlete that has been doing this for any time or has trained well can easily access 130 beats a minute. If you're going for a zone 2 easy run, that 130 beats a minute is pretty hard to come by. I've been doing this stuff since 2004, and I don't see 130 beats a minute very often, even in my zone 2 running. My zone 2, I'm like 140, 145, and that's super slow. So that's the kind of some of the tips I want to get out there is, you're going to have to slow down to a pace to where you can reach that. If that is your zone, if you've calculated your zones correctly, whatever method you're using. For my athletes, I do fitness assessments and then do a 1.5 mile run test and kind of use that as their threshold heart rate, and I back out the zones out of that. Usually I'm using Joe Friel's heart rate zones based on your threshold heart rate. So that's how we get zones. So that's how I know what to assign zones for my athletes when they're doing a workout. So for their zone 2 stuff, it may be 140 to 155 or 145 to 160, or kind of just depends on what their threshold is. So you take your baseline of where you're starting at, and if you get to that threshold test and you threshold your highest heart rate, your average heart rate for that 1.5 miles is 185, that's going to go through and it's going to calculate the different zones for you. So at first, your zone 2 is going to be a little bit higher, but as your fitness gets better and you redo your assessment and you top out at maybe at 175, then those zones go down because you should be able to hold those and still produce a decent pace out of that. So it's kind of counterintuitive. You should be able to go faster and lower heart rates as you get more fitness. To get to that point, you need to make sure you're doing plenty of aerobic work. So long zone 2, either rides or runs. A rule of thumb a lot of people use is 80-20. So 80% of your work is in that zone 2 stuff. 20% is your intervals and speed and threshold and power work and all that kind of stuff. So you need to make sure that you're doing the proper mixture of work. So if you're out there and you're just killing every workout, you're not going to be able to get to that heart rate zone. So you need to make sure, especially on the long work, if you're doing your weekends, if you're doing a 9-mile run and maybe a 40-mile bike ride, if those are easy zone 2 work, don't take that bike ride and don't go kill a bunch of hills. You need to find a flat course, something that's not too challenging. And when you do hit hills, you need to be able to back off and just spin it up the hills to keep that zone 2. The goal of that workout is to work on that aerobic base and get your body used to working at that heart rate range. And over time, you will get more efficient at being able to produce power, being able to produce speed and whatnot for each discipline as you get your body trained to work in that heart rate zone. So if that makes sense, you got to train in those zones in order to get better in those zones. So that over time will help you get that heart rate, being able to get those lower heart rate zones with an easier effort that says that you don't have to walk at a snail's pace in order to stay in that heart rate range. So at first it may be you run for 4 or 5 minutes and you start getting to that heart rate, above your zones, and you walk for a minute to get the heart rate down. So you're artificially trying to keep that heart rate down by running and walking, or jogging and walking, or fast walking, whatever you need to do to start with. I typically tell my athletes, try to jog as slow as possible. You don't need to walk, if it's a 7-mile run and you have to walk in order to keep the heart rate range, that kind of drags out a workout longer than you need to. So, do different things. Like I said, mix up the walk-run ratios and try to just keep that heart rate low. For the first couple months, it's going to be hard. And after that, you should see some changes as you get adapted to doing that long, slow aerobic pace work. Your body will respond. So just keep that in mind. It takes consistency over time. If this 9 months has been kind of your first attempt at really training for long distance, it's going to be kind of hard. Like I said, I've been doing this stuff since 2004. So basically, it could be a year or two before you really get there, especially if you've done, sprint work, or you come from like a CrossFit lifting background or strength work. It's going to be kind of hard because your body is probably used to, really hard bursts at high intensities for a short amount of time. So that's really not going to set you up in a good spot for long aerobic efforts over distance and time. So it's just going to take time to get your body adapted to that. Another side of it is making sure you're efficient in your run and your cycling. So a good bike fit, and you got a good position that you don't have to strain yourself in, and you're getting optimal power, and you're able to get the most power to your pedals without causing the most amount of discomfort and inefficiency in your body mechanics. Same goes for running. So if you have a not so good running form and you're not economical over time, you're going to have to work harder to keep a pace. So make sure that you've got a good run form. I do assessments. Most coaches will do assessments over video. It's pretty straightforward. There's plenty on the internet if you wanted to Google it of good running forms. Most people, I make sure that they're leaning at the ankles. You're making gravity do most of the work, and you're avoiding that heel strike because it's basically like putting on the brakes. So that real quick, check your run form. Make sure you're as efficient as possible, because that over time, it may not make you faster in the short term, but over 13.1 miles, over 26.2 miles, if you have good run form, that pace you're able to do for the first 10 miles is the pace you may be able to hold close to for the last 10 miles and still keep efficiency, still keep that heart rate down, because you don't have to work as hard to keep that pace and that effort. So hopefully, Nate, that helps you out. If you got any other questions, put them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. So we'll talk to you guys later. Happy training.